tonight our presenters are Kevin Heffernan, who is a past president, and as I mentioned earlier during our little talk, he was the May Count coordinator, and he's on the board. And I don't know what all he's done, but he's done a lot for the club. And also there is Linda Hunt, who is a Master Naturalist and also into native pollinator habitat. And hopefully Kevin will also mention in his yard, he had his yard redone and to attract pollinators with the plantings. So without further ado, the butterfly program with Kevin and Linda. And before we get started, you might want to go to the bottom of your screen if you're on a laptop and click on the 3 little dots that are vertical, and you can be in the change layout to spotlight, and then you will not see everybody in their tile and just see the presenter.
Okay, I'm going to be starting, and Kevin and I are going to be swapping back and forth as we go through our presentation today. We can't rival the numbers that you got on your last count, because I think the total that we have actually seen in Howard County of butterflies is somewhere around 83. And that counts some of the ones that were seen before our survey started in 2013. So this is the 7th year of the survey. If we don't count the first year, the prototype year, we're calling that. Otherwise, we've been at this for 8 years. I started in 2013, so I'm as old as the survey is, I guess, at this point. And so we want to welcome you. I see when looking up and down the names that are here that there are a lot of bird club people that I obviously recognize who also are doing butterfly surveys, and I see a number of people who I know are not in the bird club because they don't live around here or whatever. And I welcome you guys, and I thank all of you immensely, both as Kevin and I do. Completely. Oops, what's going on? Kevin's trying to bring up the, I assume he's trying to bring up the PowerPoint that we're doing. He will be running the PowerPoint, and I'm going to be talking for the first part whenever it comes up. Then he will be talking, then I will be talking again, and then he will be finishing off pretty much.
So can people actually see the PowerPoint at this point?
Nope, we see you.
Okay.
So I can do some of my intro stuff while you guys are pulling it up. This title isn't exactly the same as the original one that I had, which was had something to do with backyard butterflying during a pandemic or something like that. And that was based on a quick need for a title and my assumption that people were not going too far from home, because being close to 80, I didn't go too far from home in the beginning. And then I discovered as I was doing the compiling of the survey that everybody else was leaving their home too, and they were out there because we all needed to get out somewhere. And people started sending butterfly reports in to me as early as, well, I came back on February 29th from Florida, and somewhere in that time period, I already had heard of people who had seen things in February, and people were starting to send in butterfly comments. This one is from the beginning of April, but it pretty much sums up. You'll see Kathy's response when she found her first snout for the year sitting in a pine tree, and that was the very beginning of April. So I want to encourage people. March is a little rough. You're trying to get maybe some commas, a morning clove, cabbage whites, whatever. Some very early spring things, and it's kind of dead. But in April, things start to pick up, and one of the things we want to talk about is the fact that we need more people out there in the early time period. But as I said, people were going out and about. I'm going to be saying to Kevin something like next, unless he has telepathic powers here and knows when I'm going to go. So why don't you go into the next thing, Kevin, if you can. We'll just see what happens.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay. Now I'm seeing your host. Okay, you've got it, Kevin. That's the whole thing. Okay, very good. Okay, so because of the pandemic, we were not having field trips. We tried to avoid very large crowds when we were going out, at least most of the people that I had talked to did. And in the very beginning, we were contemplating whether we even were allowed to go out somewhere. So anyway, March turned into April. April turned into May. Eventually, we got to the end of the year and we had actually completed a thing. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hmm.
I may be doing a monologue without pictures.
So it's interesting. It won't shift to the next one. So hang on a minute. Hitting escape, and that's not working. All right. Okay.
Okay,
That's good. That's
Kevin.
what
Kevin, before you start, I want to make sure, can everybody see it and hear everything?
Yes.
I'm good. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Are we loud enough?
Yes, and
Yes.
make sure everybody please mute and turn off your video.
Okay. All right, so this is what I was just saying. Okay, go ahead, Kevin, see if it goes up to the next slide. Just as some background, I ended up trying to time this because Kevin and I switched back and forth. And so I was allowing myself 5 minutes max for this first section. And then allowing myself another 20 minutes or so, or 25 minutes for the part where I'm actually talking about something of interest, the actual butterflies. And then Kevin gets 30 minutes at the end. So we're not trying to keep you here all night as we go through. So anyway, in the spring, this is what was coming into me in March. And I wasn't even sure whether we were going to be having a survey at this point. John McKitterick ended up with the first butterfly of the year, obviously an overwintering variegated Fritillary, which is interesting in its own right. And then the usual things were bopping through a falcate orange tip, tiger. And then toward the end, I think it was April 29th, Julie Constantino and her son Logan found this wonderful elfin juniper hair streak in her backyard, more or less. I don't know what she backs up to, but obviously some juniper, some cedar. So at this point, people were loosening up a little bit and heading out to the parks. But then the problem was that nobody could get anywhere. They were ticketing people outside Centennial because the gates were closed to the actual parking. And so then we were parking on the street. And then all the places had cars backed up. So it was impossible to get into some of our sites. So one of the things that happened at this point is that we ended up going to places that weren't our typical places. Okay, go ahead if you can, Kevin. Okay, so here are our results, the basic things. Now, this is not the best year we've had, but I think it's wonderful considering the fact that we had so many challenges and we had no field trips, couldn't get together with each other. So basically, people spent over 678 hours doing surveys. There were 48 surveyors, 71 species, which, as I said, are normal. The maximum we've ever had in a survey is 80 species. And we usually have over 70 plus. So this is what I'm describing as an average type of year as we went through. And I want to give all the thanks to people who got out there, continued to send things in and to motivate us. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about the survey results. We're going to compare them to the previous 6 years. I'm picking out a very few selected Howard County species that I feel, it's my opinion, need some conservation efforts. And then Kevin is going to be talking about some conservation things that can be done by gardeners or that possibly parks may need to be helping us with. Okay, videos and pictures that I thought we could include. The technology was keeping us from being able to do that. Okay, Kevin, go ahead. Okay, so these are the 3 things we picked out of this year's survey. That the survey participation and results are comparable to previous years. Private meadows and gardens are increasing important habitats, and they're getting unusual species as well as common ones. And survival in Howard County of some of Howard County's rarer species are going to depend on targeted habitat and species-specific surveys and activities. Go ahead. So those are our 3 themes. Okay, the first thing that people always ask me, well, it's been raining a lot. Does this impact the amount of butterflies I'm seeing? And some people also ask, does it impact the people, getting enough people out to do the survey? So every year I do a chart, something like this, and a couple pieces of my chart disappeared, but that's okay. The yellow are what I call Sundays. I'm using Weather Underground, and they have calendars, and they show you how many days of, quote, partial sun they've had. They're using BWI, which I know is distant from us and probably has different rain and et cetera around here, but it's the closest I can come to. The key thing about this particular year is if you look on the left side of the chart, the dark area is the 2020 in both the yellow and the blue, and the light areas are the average from the previous 6 years. And you'll see that this year it was less sunny and it was about 10 degrees cooler. Our 2020 year is the red line. And about 10 degrees cooler as you're going through April and May. And this probably did affect some of our observers being out, but not much, but it's probably affecting some of our results from the early spring species. Also, the pandemic made an impact, I think, in here because we just weren't going out. And we couldn't get out to some of the places we normally go. The blue is precipitation. Same thing applies. The blue, dark blue is 2020. In August, it was just raining. And then we had a cooler fall. We get a lot of numbers of butterflies in that August, September time period. And so I think, my opinion, I think that this may have been like local weather influences on some of the things that we are seeing. But there's a lot of others that go with it. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, start looking at this not by the numbers, but just by looking at the bars, how far they go up. The dark is 2020. The light is the average for the previous 6 years. And this is observers and surveys. What I'm doing is a process of elimination to try to take out whether there were any factors other than just what's happening with a species to find out whether a species needs conservation efforts. So you can see the cooler area over here. We had about the same number of surveyors, which is the red and pink area at the bottom, as we normally have. In fact, we usually had a few more each month. This tells me people really needed to get out. And the tall gray, dark gray are the actual surveys. In March, we did not have very many. April, May, we did not have very many, but basically, they're more or less the same when you average them out. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, I looked at where people were going, and I do this every year. Parks, gardens, and parks is kind of loosey because I call Lake Himaquandi anything a park. It's not just the Howard County parks. All right, so the parks, the gardens, and others. Usually, if you look at those first two, you'll see that like 2019 is in green. We usually have a lot of parks and a lot of gardens that are surveyed, and they seem to predominate. Look at the blue, the dark blue on the far right-hand side. That's 2020. It's dramatically different. It's almost double anybody going to some of these other areas in the gardens. So there are a couple habitats I want you to look at here because I feel that they are going to be important, and especially the top two. The left bottom power line one is a spot which is the dusted skipper area, and I'll be talking a little bit about that and about other power lines. The top left side is a farm up in Woodbine, and this particular habitat has open fields, mowed periodically, hay, grasses, has a pond down there. It has about probably 5 acres plus or minus of native pollinator habitat and wet meadows. And this area produces meadow fritillaries, all 3 fritillaries actually, and it's an ideal spot for open, probably one of the few open types of things. It backs up to Patuxent River State Park, which you see in the background. So we get all the things from the wet meadow to the wide open to the checkered skip that you see down there. The upper right one is not from this year. This habitat is no longer available to us in the coastal plain along Route 1 and the Hanover, Elk Ridge, etc. area. This is now a development of apartments, school, little out, Howard Community College. And this is Kevin and Karen chasing Little Yellow. This is the Little Yellow and the checkered white area. The bottom right are what I'm calling waste spaces. All these are low growth habitats. The waste areas that we go into around Gateway, this is again along Route 1, recently developed. And that's a water management sort of pond and just dump, whatever. So this area is an important area for some of our hair streaks. So anyway, we are missing the upper right, which is affecting some of our butterflies. Okay, let's go ahead. And then I'm done with this section. So this is the way the numbers looked across the years. We had more individuals, as you can see, 26,000 individuals in 2019, and that's pretty much the top that we've had. This year we had about 20,000 and something, whatever I have in that chart. We had 71 species this year. The highest year was again in 2019, although 2016 was actually a very, very good year for species, but we didn't have as many individuals. That's the year we had the little yellow, the bronze copper, some of the rarities that we're not seeing all the time. Okay, Kevin, it's all yours.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a couple of pie charts. The one on the left is showing the 2020 totals, and the one on the right is showing the totals for the 7 years of the survey. And basically, it's the number of individuals by species. And you'll notice that in 2020 we had 13 species that made up 84% of the total number of individuals, and the other the other 58 species made up the other 16%. So you can see a vast dichotomy in the number of individuals and species are dominated by a few. And the same thing's true of the 7-year totals. And in fact, the top 11 in 2020 and the top 11 in the 7-year totals are identical. They're just maybe a little different order and a little different percentage, but they're the same 11. So the thing that changed is I have 13 in the left one and 14 species in the right one. So the two at the 12th and 13th in the left one in 2020 are sleepy orange and cloudless sulfur, which made it for the first time. And they displaced the least skipper, the clouded sulfur, and the variegated Fritillary in the 7-year total. So this is the first year that sleepy orange and cloudless sulfurs numbers were greater than clouded sulfur numbers. And to give you an idea how much they've come as a species, the first year we did this in 2014, we had 0 cloudless sulfurs and 7 sleepy oranges. And then in 2020, we had 424 cloudless sulfurs and 588 sleepy oranges. So big difference. It's a southern butterfly migration, which is a theme of this talk that you'll hear over and over again over the next 45 minutes or so. So this is another way of presenting that same data. This is basically a cumulative number of individuals by species. So in order to get to 1% of the total, you had to get like 28 species or something like that out of the 72. It's 72 because we have azure species as opposed to spring or summer when it's not clear. But you're looking at, by the time you get to 50 species, you're at 6%, and then it just takes off. So the number of individuals are dominated by a few species, as we saw on the pie chart, and this is just another way of showing it. So looking at the species with the highest count in 2020 of the 7 years of the survey, it's this 7. Linda's going to discuss the Brazilian skipper, the coral hairstreak, and the silvery checker spot later on, so I won't talk about that now. Long-tailed skipper, we had a massive total of 4, which happens to be the most we've had in 7 years. We've had 4 a couple other times as well, but that's been our tops. We've already talked sleepy orange and cloudless sulfur, and northern broken dash had a very good year as well. And going down, looking at 2-year trends, which I actually think is more important, because you'll see during the 7 years that you get peaks and valleys. So, for example, in 2018, tiger swallowtail had 641 individuals. In 2019, there were 3,234. And then in 2020, it went back down to 1,224. So big dichotomy year to year, probably mostly weather related, but could be other things as well. So the one thing odd about this one, where the last 2 years were the highest counts of the 7 they're all southern migrants. So once again, that same theme. So moving on to the species with the lowest tally in the 7-year survey, there's 14 species on here, which on the face of it is pretty scary. Again, there's been ups and downs in this thing. So the 1 year doesn't worry me. It's when you get 2 years in a row or 3 years in a row, I start to get concerned. But if you look at this, in terms of species with spring broods, you've got Juvenil's hairstreak, you've got zebra swallowtail, you've got American copper, you've got falcate orange tip, you've got indigo, wild indigo dusky wing, Juniper hairstreak, spring azure, dusted skipper, and American lady. All of those have spring broods, and spring was 10 degrees colder in April and 8 degrees colder in May. So that may have had something dramatic to do with the results of the year for these guys. So again, I wouldn't worry about the 1 year low, but I do worry about the 2 year lows, and that is this chart. So these 7 species had 2 years running, the 2 lowest years of the 7 in 2019 and 2020. Orange sulfur, wild indigo, white M, dusted skipper, morning cloak, great spangled, and tawny edged. These are, again, with 2 years, it's not much of a statistical sample, but it's something to keep an eye on, basically. And Linda has more information on the great spangled later on as well, and the dusted skipper, actually, and the white M as well. So we'll catch up to that later. So this chart is somewhat interesting. It kind of pulls it all together. So we've had 80 species in the survey over 7 years. We had 71 in 2020. We missed 9. The ones in the left-hand column are the ones we missed. No surprise on the ones in blue, because if you look at the second column, these are the ones that we're seeing less than 10 individuals total in the 7 years. So they're either extremely rare or, just, yeah, they're,
Nice.
yeah, they're strays basically. So, no surprise with that. The third column, it's less than 10 seen every year in a 7-year survey, as opposed to less than 10 seen total in the 7 years. And of course, those blue ones show up again, but now the yellow ones show up here too. There's 14 of these. So, this is the tail of that one graph, basically. And if you move over to the fourth column, less than 10 seen in 2020 is going to show the same ones in yellow, but it also has these 5 in green. There were 17 species with less than 10 in 2020. And the 5 in green, if you move over to the rightmost column, were part of the group that had the largest drop from 2019 to 2020. I put the top 10 in here. The worst was Eastern Comma that had 1/6 as many individuals in 2020 as we did in 2019. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this graph because one of the things I was trying to get my head wrapped around was what's the best way to present butterfly observation facts and which ones fit into which categories. So with a survey like this, most people have gone out to gardens and fields and things like that where butterflies are more common. And in the yellow circle with the bold edge to it, you're going to see multiple brood butterflies that nectar on plants in gardens and fields. So most swallowtails, whites, sulfurs, most skippers, summer azure, eastern tail blue, gray and red banded hairstreak, variegated frit, pearl crescent, both ladies, the buckeye, and the monarch. Those are the ones that dominate the pie chart I showed earlier, and for good reason. They're the places that we normally go. So you're going to see most those first, the soonest, basically, and oftentimes they are the most common as well. If you go to the darker blue circle right next to it, there are also single brood butterflies that nectar. You may only have them out 2-3 weeks for the year. So Hobomope skipper, juveniles dusky wing, banded and coral hairstreak, and great spangled frit. Most of those are out, maybe 3 weeks or so. Great spangled is out for a longer period of time. It peaks in June, and July, August, and a little bit in September. You'll see those, but those are actually having a hard time finding them nowadays. And again, Linda will deal with that one. If you go to the gray circle, butterflies that don't nectar or rarely nectar are in there. So you have the littlewood satyr, common wood nymph, ap brown, northern pearly eye, both emperors, snout, all 3 angle wings, the harvester, red admiral, viceroy, and red spotted purple. You'll see the last 3, red admiral, viceroy, red spotted purple, nectaring. I've seen common question mark very occasionally nectaring. And that's really, and snouts as well. So you'll see those nectaring, which is why it's overlapping the yellow circle a little bit. But generally, they get their nourishment other places as a prime method. So again, they're a little more difficult to find, a little more difficult to see, and they don't hang out on the flowers like the ones in the yellow do. Then you go to the upper right, and you get the lighter blue ones, and these are butterflies that are in habitats you really have to go out of your way to visit. So both cloudy wings, dusted and broad-winged skippers, eastern pine and Henry's elfin, falcate orange tip, juniper hairstreak, meadow frit, ap brown, little yellow harvester, zebra swallowtail, both emperors, and snout. So this is where we need to work. Basically, we can get people that are interested in going out in the odd places at the right time to find these guys. I think we'll do better with some of the numbers on some of these that are really low numbers of individuals for their particular species. If you go to the orange one, late summer and fall migrants, Ocala, long-tailed, clouded, and fiery skippers, common checkered, giant swallowtail, checkered white. Some of these are getting fairly common, like fiery skipper has really jumped up. And some of these are in more than one circle. So fiery skipper really ought to be in the yellow circle, is in the most skippers group in the yellow circle as well. And common checkered has its big ears and its okay ears, but it's not an uncommon butterfly so much. But again, this means going out in the fall looking for these guys. If you go to the green ones, it's the butterflies that are hard to ID, right? The juvenile's dusky wing, it doesn't necessarily show you its underwing very often. Spring azure, which is clearly an issue, and the witches, and I include 5 of them instead of 3, the northern broken dash, little glassy wing, dun, tawny edge, and crossline. This is an education thing that we need to deal with, including me, starting with me probably with these, and trying to get these to the point where people are reporting them as opposed to skipping them because they don't know which it is, that sort of thing. And then the last one is the strays, basically, that we're going to see really infrequently: the bronze copper, little yellow, Danish sulfur, checkered white, hair scallop wing, and Henry's elfin. So my last chart before I shift it back to Linda, I put together.
Do you have two microphones operating?
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
No. No, there's a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
So can everybody else turn off their microphone?
Gail, you're connected twice.
Okay, how about now? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is my last chart for this section, and basically it just shows the flight times roughly for the butterflies that are single brood or exist in a specialized habitat. I only went April through August on this one, but it just gives you a sense of when to get out for these guys. That is something that we could use some extra eyes on if you're so inclined. We will put some of these out either on the Bird Club website or by email or something like that, so people can have it. We'll probably put the whole PowerPoint out as well. So I'm going to shift to the next one and have Linda take over.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. This one is taking essentially those successful high number species in the top and the ones that were either not seen at all or at the very bottom. And I chose a few of these out just to give demonstration of some of the different types. I'm going to spend most of my time on the hair streaks because we never spend time on the hair streaks, and that's just an area that seems to never get better. And my concern with the Fritillaries, which are common butterflies normally, but from what we're seeing in the charts, it's not good. And what I'm seeing when I'm traveling around, especially up in the Woodbine and what I call the Up County area, is concerning to me. All right, first thing that pops out, obviously, is we've got 4 southern migrants in the top and 4 southern migrants in the bottom. And so I'm going to show a little bit about those for people who are not necessarily familiar with them. And I'm also trying to indicate whether gardeners who are providing some good habitat for some of these different types of butterflies, the more unusual ones, what they can add to their gardens, or if you just forget about it. The coral hair streak and the silvery checker spot I'll discuss separately a little bit later. Bronze copper and Henry's elfin. Henry's elfin, I think, we've seen it just once in 2018, I believe, over at High Ridge Park, which is down near Laurel, just almost into Laurel. And one of our thoughts is wondering whether the elfins are trying to move up into that park from expanding out of Patuxent Wildlife Refuge. There's a red bud up there, and there's a lot of holly up there. So I think it might be a good habitat for them. Bronze copper, we probably will never see again. It's a little more northern. It's in the decline. It's just extremely, extremely rare. The dusted skipper I'm going to talk about next. So I'm going to give a few very quick things about the southern migrants and then hit the dusted skipper and then leave this chart completely and go on to hair streaks. Okay, Kevin? Kevin? Okay, skip this one completely. Okay. All right, gardeners. Okay. Spectacular butterflies that everybody wants to see. All right. The way to see them is add some zinnias and lantana to your gardens. All right. These are strays. They come through on a regular basis. They're dramatic. They're very pretty. Add some zinnias and lantana. They can't overwinter. Keep going, Kevin. Okay. Southern hitchhikers. Everybody wonders, well, will the Brazilian overwinter? No. Anyway, these travel north on the Cana lilies. Christina McClure had, and Mike had 6 caterpillars on their Cana in the garden. Jim is seeing them on Cana that the Columbia Association is planting around, and he actually saw an adult. So you might have some fun. People are beginning to plant more. You need to have multiple plants to get them up here. The Danish sulfur came in probably on the hay they were using for landscaping, and there was just a lot of them over there. They did check this spring. Annette Allure walked in from God knows where because there were so many cars over there, nobody could get in, and checked the area, and there were no evidence that they overwintered at all, which is to be expected. All right, let's go ahead. Southern immigrants or occasional residents. Everybody wants to make the sleepy orange and the cloudless sulfur an occasional resident or a resident. So I likewise would love to see them as a resident. Robinson and Lake Kittamaqundi are the 2 areas where the cloudless sulfur and the sleepy orange are spending their time.
Linda,
Yeah.
this
Jim?
is Jim here.
Yeah.
They are still at Oxford Square, but they're more on the gas line and stuff. But they are still breeding there. I mean, I
Which
had the
one, the cloudless or the sleepy,
cloudless.
or both?
cloudless. I've seen
Cloudless.
sleepies there too, but not every year. But
Okay.
cloudless, yes.
Yeah, the sleepies are basically, see huge numbers of sleepies over at Robinson, but I'm
Yeah.
actually hearing more cloudless coming from Lake Kittamaqundi right now. This particular,
Mount Pleasant as well.
yeah, there's a new spot up near Mount Pleasant that has the Senna, the Maryland Senna, which is attracting them. And this all started when Robinson initially opened and started planting the Maryland Senna down there.
Yeah,
Now
that's
it's
a big
all
thing.
over, including my garden, because I've added it. So anyway, look at this chart, and I noticed that Rick Borshak is, or was, I don't know whether he's still with us, but I would like later on his feedback on some of this particular area. So anyway, this is over, this is the 2020 chart. And you can see where they're arriving. The orange line is our resident orange sulfur, which I put in for comparison. And we're not seeing anything other than very small numbers through June. We are not seeing either of these 2 butterflies until July. Now, I would expect to see them in July as immigrants, as migrants up here. So this chart to me is not showing anything in particular that they are residing here. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, doing it a different way over time. The top chart is from 2014 to 2020, and they're all different colors. Purple is this year, is the 2020 year, and I've got little things marked on it. So most of these come from the sleepy orange, come from Robinson, and I'm only doing the early part. You'll notice that it hasn't been until 2019, which is over in the late June thing, and just a scattering of some of the others before the mid-June area. Although starting in 2017, well, 15, 17, and 19, we had a few more in the early June time period. That might indicate something. The cloudless sulfur, however, isn't even showing up until late June in 2019. They did not show at all before that time. This is the earliest that 2019 was the earliest they were showing up at all in June. And then over in the right-hand side at in 2020, you'll see that they're showing up in late May, early June, mid-June, etc. So there are more here, but that high peak of 14 individuals at Lake K, Kittamuqundi, is not necessarily showing us much of anything. It could be just an arrival at that point that he hit it, or it could have been an emergence that he hit. But I am not seeing from the data that we have that there is something like a number of individuals that are emerging. We're having just leftovers or just strays coming up a little head. I was in Atlanta, Georgia in March and watched the cloudless migration coming up through. They are direct, they are fast, they swerve around the buildings and they keep going. And so there's no question in my mind that a lot of these can be up here fairly early. So that's my view of these two. Okay, let's go on and see where we're heading. All right, spring species. All right. Kevin's talked a lot about the different issues here: single brood, observation challenges, accessibility of the sites, etc. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, the dusted skipper update. All right, we have missed the dusted skipper for 2 years, 2019 and 2020. This year I called out the heavy guns, and Annette came up. Kathy, I think, may have been up there one of the days. Jim came over, I think. Kevin and I were, Kevin and Karen and I were up there. And I can't remember if Tim Reichard was up there also. At any rate, they flooded the area. And we were seeing probably up there, somebody was up there twice a week. We started overall from 2014 to 2020, we have walked that one small section of the power line up there 65 times over that entire time, spending at least an hour up there walking. In the beginning, there was the proper habitat. And in those years, the early years, I was the only one going up there. And then Kevin and Karen joined me, and then other people joined periodically. So in the beginning, there was a low grass upland mowed area of dry soil on rocks that are emerging out of the ground. I don't know what kind, like granite rising out or something. West facing. And that's the only spot they were on the power line. They weren't anywhere else along that area. It is a very small population. So we have had 22 total sightings of individuals over that entire period. That's all. I use the southern cloudy wing and northern cloudy wing numbers so that you can see that we were physically up there counting those things. The place has been, the habitat is degraded. They put in a dump next to it, took out 7 acres of trees. They are a small area. They're not going to be flying around, I don't think, coming out of out of Patuxent Wildlife Refuge, which is the closest spot to here. So we just are not seeing that population. It may be that it's too wet up there, but the vegetation has changed from sort of a grassy type of thing to bushy and invasive types of things, and the mowing has changed on it. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a population that is just plain gone, and that we are not going to be seeing it come back. In addition, I saw what looks like it was either burned, like there was a small wildfire up there, or the shrubby, bushy, invasive types of multiflora rose or whatever has been hand sprayed or somehow sprayed, and it's all black. and sort of dead. So I don't know whether they've sprayed up there at all. So I don't know what's happening up there, but I think that we have lost this species. My concern is that areas other than this will also mean that the southern cloudy wing is going to be following. The northern cloudy wing is a little bit more tolerant of different types of habitats, and you see those up in Patapsco and some of the other areas like that. And I saw that Rick came in with a chat, so I will be happy to go back and talk with him about this. Anyway, this is one you have to go look for. We will continue looking for. I usually start, the time to start is the beginning of May and going to the middle of July for this particular location. You can see on the chart where the different, where we begin. It's never before the middle of May, and it's never after pretty much July 4th, beginning of July, early July. Okay, let's go ahead to the next one. All right, hair streaks. There are reasons people aren't seeing hair streaks, as Kevin indicated. This is one of those areas. Single brooded. They're sometimes in areas you have to go out and look for, especially the first two that I'm going to show. And they have a difficult flight pattern for you, and they're just sneaky little devils. The left-hand picture is the white M. Annette Allure and I saw white M's in two different locations, MPEA and I went over to Gateway, on exactly the same morning of exactly the same day. And then Jim saw one at the end of the year in October, and those were the only three this year. And Annette and I were looking for them, not purposely timed together, but we were looking for them. This is a picture of where this little sucker was. It was a huge mass of eupatorium, and I thought, do I really want to walk over through all this mess that was between me and where that eupatorium was? And I said, I better go over there. So I went over, and there's this little sucker just hiding in there. The coral hair streak in the upper right. All right, little things, beautiful things. Not difficult. They're right out there in the opening, just sitting on the milkweed plant, but you can barely see them. And they're usually on the wrong side of the milkweed. And then this one is the pine elfin that I found up at the farm I showed you earlier, sitting in the grass. I was really looking for dusky wings because we hadn't seen very many. And so I'm going around and I'm saying, what is that? That little dark thing from walking around the pond. And I'm walking. And I get up and I say, not a dusky wing. And then I look at it, what is that little thing doing over here? So I hadn't even noticed the appropriate trees that I needed to notice. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, my little friend, the Eastern Pine Elfin. All right, and this particular one place, I had to look to see where the pine tree was because it was sitting in that little grassy, semi-bare spot on a dam, an earthen dam, and it was probably out there just sort of basking. Possibly it had been doing some puddling, but I didn't see anything around that would have been appropriate. It does come down to flowers, but it was a ways from the flowers. I've heard that and read that they like to have flowers, little nectar areas, like maybe within a half a football field or maybe a football field away, but not too far away. I looked around and there on the hill they were.
Linda?
Who's jumping in? Jim?
Jim?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say the mowing at the Trinity Church Cemetery has gotten more frequent, and I used to see them nectaring on pussy toes. I think it's Antenaria, and the pine trees are still there, but I haven't seen them recently there. And I also found them at Oxford Square, but the area I had them in there has been developed. So I'm not sure if those two areas are going to produce anymore or not. I don't know. I'm keep checking them, but
Right. Trinity Cemetery was the go-to place. I had a place up at Hipsley Mill in Patuxent River State Park that is completely gone. There's almost no flowers of any type. It's successional habitat and it's mostly trees, and the word meadow is like historic. So what I would suggest, and this is what I think we need to do, is see if we can find some more Virginia pines. Flip to the next thing there. And not the white pine. We've only had 2 instances where they were away from the Virginia pine. And if you're not familiar with the differences, the white pine has long needles, and there's 5 little needle things on each of the little stems. And the Virginia pine has 2 little needles, and they're shorter. The cones are more round on the Virginia, and you can usually tell this from a distance. And in the little white, the white pine cones, which I have in the bottom right, there was more long things. So I'm sure you're all familiar with these. The habitat that the pine elfin was in is on the left-hand side. So targeting this particular species by finding existent historic pines, and it doesn't matter if it's older or younger ones, despite what the book says. There's always some kind of little buds or something there. All right, let's flip to the next one. All right, the juniper is the same problem, except that there's more junipers around than the historic pines. And the go-to place is Mount Pleasant. Again, these like to find a little nectaring place. So instead of walking over to Gateway and going through the tick fields, it's good to go up to Mount Pleasant. However, it would be nice to see if we could find some other areas that these particular hair streaks are inhabiting. And I think part of the problem is people have to get out at the right time. And it looks like from the charts that I have showing here that spring brood is a lot larger than the middle of July brood, even though we have more people out in the middle of July to be observing. They're right next to the gardens up there, and you can walk in the garden and see them. So I would have expected to see more numbers from the middle brood as we go through.
We actually only had 6 this year, Linda, and
I know.
we missed the July brood completely.
We missed the middle brood. I missed all the falcate orange tips and some of the things in April because I was not out driving around. So I saw like my 2 little orange tips, or 4 of them or something like that, up at that farm, which was like, whoa, what are you guys doing here? So, and I think people missed a lot of the stuff this year simply because they weren't out in this time period. But we need more people who are going out, and we need birders who are going out and reporting back to us, oh, I saw a Virginia pine stand over in X park or at X spot. Quite often they aren't in parks. And the same with eastern red cedar. And you know what they look like because you're looking for the birds in them. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, coral hair streak. This is the reverse of the other 2. The junipers and the pine elfins, you've got to find a specific spot. The problem with a coral hair streak that it could be anywhere. And their host plants are the cherry, the prunus species, chokeberry, etc. They nectar on milkweed. They come out at a very specific time when the milkweed is out. So again, these should be commonly seen. And either we just aren't looking or something. The places that they've been seen, you can look across the chart. The Hipsley Mill area is gone. The Annapolis Rock area is gone. Warfield's Pond only had 1. Jim and I saw one up there. There's only 2 gardens, Kathy Litzinger's and Kate Tufts, that have seen them actually coming into the milkweed in the garden. But there's no reason why they shouldn't appear there. So I think, and I know that gardeners who are into butterflies, the minute they see this gorgeous, gorgeous butterfly, they will report it. because it's so unique. There's no identification problem at all with this. For the birders, in the upper right-hand corner is the egg mass, which is the way that this particular butterfly lays its eggs on the bark of the tree. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, the white M, same thing. Hiding in plain sight, a characteristic hair streak swirly pattern. I swear I've looked and seen it and tried to get my camera out, and the next time I look back, like 5 seconds later after I turn my camera on, the stupid thing is gone. And so, and occasionally you get one, like in the upper right-hand corner. Bill Hill and I found one in a waste water management, dry, scrubby thing like what I showed you on Route 1 in that picture back earlier of habitats. And we messed with that butterfly probably for 20 minutes, and it stayed on there so that he could try to get a picture of it with the wings open. On the left is Annette's funny little picture, which I just had to have in this, which is showing the key white spot that you can differentiate it from the gray hair streak. And it was sort of like an epiphany for me when somebody finally told me that there's this little white spot, and that besides the M, that you could use as your guideline to whether you had a white M or not. I said, oh, really? And then I started seeing white M's. So just identification issues here, good eyes, encourage more people to go out and look for them. There's no reason why we're not seeing them. And they disperse. I know they disperse right after they emerge. So you're not going to find them in groups normally. This year, Annette found, no, that was the coral. She found a whole bunch of corals up there this year. They don't disperse, but these disperse. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah, Linda, we have to pick this up a little bit.
I know, because otherwise you won't get a chance. I'm going to skip the zebra completely. Okay, just go out and find some pawpaw for us. Go to Wynkoppen. Nobody's reported anything from Wynkoppen. Okay, the Fritillaries. 3 different types, not, well, related because they're Fritillaries, but they have 3 different lifestyles here. All right, I'm not worried about the metal Fritillary. It's a little homebody. It finds its little moist metal, and it hangs around, doesn't go anywhere, really. There's 3 different broods. It likes violet and silver winters, and I'm not worried about them. Till all the wet metals are destroyed, we'll have them around somewhere. All right, variegated Fritillary, I am a little worried about, but not too much. It did this nosedive, if you can see it. Where is it here? It's the big orange line, and you'll see that it was a peak in 2019 and it did a nosedive. Well, it happens to come out in August and September. That's its key time. And it rained 18 inches of rain during that time. I suspect that that is our problem. You can put passion vine in your garden. It's more cosmopolitan. It doesn't need an extant existing non-disturbed. In fact, it likes disturbed areas, so I'm not worried about it. The next butterfly I'm worried about. Okay, flip. Kevin, next. Good. Okay. This is going to be my end, Kevin, so then you'll get on here. All right, the Great Spangled Fritillary. Okay. It has a unique, not unique, I guess, totally unique, but it has an interesting brood cycle. The males emerge first, and then the females in the spring, and that's your early June time period. I don't know if people are even looking for them in June. They may be looking for them in July and August and September, and you can see the difference. Then they mate, and the females go estivate, they diapause, whatever. They stop doing their thing, and then they don't lay their eggs until later on. So I would suspect that what we're seeing later on may be females, and Rick can correct me later for all this stuff because I'm using books on this. All right. The caterpillars over winter next to the violets, so that in the spring as little unfed, little itty bitty caterpillars, they can come out and eat the violets. So there's a couple little issues here. This has these big males floating all over everywhere, trying to look for their females and trying to have some land that is more of a meadow type of thing with a lot of violets in it, sort of like a horse pasture or a cow pasture or something like that. Not necessarily a dense pollinator meadow, okay, where the violets are all mushed out, where they can't be seen or gotten to or whatever. So I think we're just losing all those wide open fields and meadows. Go to the next one. All right. I took all the sightings we have seen and I categorized them by where they have been seen. The bottom of the chart is the locations with the highest number of great spangles per survey. So how many have been seen each time a person had gone out? Schooley Mill Park comes out with an average of 7. Schooley Mill Park is a classic open park area with pollinator areas within it. And you go down the line to other types. I just think we're losing a population, our population in the upper part of Howard County of these. And I don't know if they'll be repopulated from some area around it. They have one brood going straight through with this funny method. Okay, so this is a parks issue, trying to, maybe farm issue, trying to keep some of this type of habitat open. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, I'm going to skip this one and go right to this one. This was a slide from last year's presentation that I wanted to represent because I think it's important. It's, you know, every person matters. And one example of that is that in 2019 or in 2018, there was a BioBlitz at Howard County Conservancy. And one young lady photographed a butterfly and said it had no idea what she had. And a couple weeks later, Bill Yuba came back and said it was a harvester. And it was the only harvester that we had that year in Howard County. So even people that aren't into butterflies, you know, taking pictures and sending them in can make a big difference. She found the rarity of the year or one of them, and she's not a butterflyer whatsoever. And you may end up being the person to find the rarity. Plus, if people decided to go to odd habitats, I think that would be really helpful for what we're trying to do here. So just think about that as you go on and you think about what you want to do in a survey. Getting people out to the different habitats at the right time of year could make a big difference with the numbers of some of these rarities. And finally, if you look at this curve, we had 26,000 butterflies in 2019, and the one person had 28% of that. And if you add the second and third, you're up to half. So 3 people out of the 62 that contributed in 2019 had half of the butterflies. So there's an opportunity for someone who really wants to get into this to, crack into that top 3 or 4 and make a monster difference in this survey. So just saying. But having said that, if you guys want to decide to send in an incidental butterfly report with a single cabbage white, we're ecstatic. We'll take every data point we can get, and we appreciate them all. So next. So one location can make a difference as well, and this is the Howard County Conservancy butterfly list that I put together. They're now up to 66 species. It's the highest in the county. The new book, Butterflies of the Mid-Atlantic by Robert Plackney and Judy Gallagher, includes the Conservancy as one of the 14 noted places to observe butterflies in Maryland. And it's the only location in Howard County. The next species that I would expect to find there are zebra swallowtail or tawny emperor. One garden can make a difference. Here's an example of the pipevine swallowtail, and you see that in the first 3 years of the survey, we had 8 pipevine swallowtails. And then the pipevine swallowtails found the pipevine in Barbara's garden. So once that happened, for the last 4 years of the survey, we had We had 38 in the rest of the county and 67 in Barbara's, Barbara's garden herself. So anyway, one garden makes a monster difference. So consider putting in a pollinator garden. I'm on the Bee City committee. Bee City is a Xerces Society program that encourages the planting of pollinator gardens. And the native plant subcommittee there, which I'm a part of as well, has come up with templates for suggested plants for different sun and soil conditions. And this is an example of one. These are all on a Howard County Bird Club website. So there's, in this case, it's sunny and dry. There's 7 primary plants. And for each of those, they have 2 or 3 alternates to use. And there's one of these for sunny, dry, sunny, moist, part sun dry, part sun moist, wet, and shady. So there's 6 of them. And in addition, there's a spreadsheet that I put together for pollinator plants that has workbooks for pollinator plants themselves, for perennials and annuals. There's one for shrubs and trees. There's one for vines, and there's one for grasses. There's 105 different perennials in the one workbook, 50 shrubs, 6 vines, and 9 grasses. And if you look at this one, that's for the perennials, it has Latin and English name, bloom start and end, color, height, spread, whether it's native or not, nectar value, whether it's a host plant, good for hummingbirds, perennial, biennial, annual, whether it needs wet, moist, or dry soil, full, part, or shade, sun, and then the deer damage level from 8 different websites, and the pollinator value, and from 2 different studies, one from the U.S. Department of Agricultural Natural Resources Conservation Service and one from Penn State, that gives you an idea of how good a pollinator plant they are. Also has larval hosts and comments. So a lot of information there, and you can sort it. So it can make it really easy to design a pollinator garden. So Karen and I did a pollinator garden in the spring, or we started actually in the winter. You can see in the upper left picture there, that was our yard about a year ago today. So half dead maple tree, crepe myrtle, some way overgrown burning bushes, some way overgrown holly. I couldn't even get in one of the garage doors. Butterfly bushes, and the original plantings, they were 25 years old around the house. So 2 days later, it was gone. All of it was gone. And a week or so after that, we had a railroad tie wall so they could flatten out an area so we could plant. We put in a fence to keep the deer out, and we started planting in May. Down the bottom, you can see the plants in late July, early August coming out. And then the zinnias, we also planted outside the fence as well. And once the flowers start blooming, it gets fun. So you can get, these are all pictures from this year in our garden, and you can get a sense of butterflies and bees. And we had a immature gray or Cope's tree frog. We had a variegated Fritillaries caterpillar, box turtle, lots of different bees. So, and here's another set of photos as well, same idea. So just seriously consider putting in a pollinator garden. I think it makes a huge difference. And particularly if you pick the host plants with certain butterflies that are pretty rare, it can make a huge difference for those as well. So moving on to monarchs, we can't do a talk like this without talking monarchs at all. And in the upper left, there's a report your sightings thing that Kathy Caberly came up, or is reporting to an outfit called Journey North to add to their data. And this came off of their website, so it's the timing of the various broods for monarchs. The bottom ones are a monarch enclosing at our house. And the one on the right was an interesting one. I was looking at the butterfly weed one day, and I saw a pupa, and right next to it was a monarch caterpillar, and shortly afterwards a monarch butterfly came in and landed right next to it, so I could get the trifecta. So anyway, the other thing I learned this year is I thought monarchs were bulletproof because they ate milkweed and they tasted terrible, but that is not even close to being true. So we had greater than 60 monarch caterpillars in our garden this year, 32 pupa we found, and only 70 closed. The rest were predated by taconid flies or calcium wasps. They basically lay their eggs either on the caterpillar itself, They hatch and dig into the caterpillar and come out of the pupa later on, and then the tachinid flies wait till the caterpillar forms a J, and then once it does its pupa and it's still soft, it lays its eggs in the pupa, and the same sort of thing happens. So changing topics really quickly, I've looked at the historical occurrence levels of butterflies in Howard County. I've taken Dick Smith's list that he started in 1993, updated in 2000, 2012, and 2016. And you can see how the occurrence levels changed with time with this, which to me is really interesting. I put down a column for 2020, but take it with a pound of salt because that was my opinion, and I need a bunch of other people to weigh in on that before it becomes official. But this is roughly right, but probably going to be some changes along the way. But from this, there's a couple things in here that were, in my opinion, pretty interesting. Dick had 6 butterflies he called LTOs, which is likely to observe. And 4 of them turned out to show up in Howard County. Now, one of them was pretty rare, the brown elfin, and we haven't seen that in a while, but mostly because we lost the ability to get to Maryland Central Farm. We haven't seen Edwards hair streak or cobweb skipper, but Ocala skipper has been here in spades, and that's one of those that's eruptive. And there are some years where you have a bunch of them, and other years where you just have a few. This particular year we had a few, but I think 2 years ago or so we had 240 of them. So pretty interesting there. And American snout we're seeing a ton of now, where back in 1993 it wasn't around. And then finally silvery checker spot, same thing. We're starting to see more and more of those, and that's another one that comes and goes. It can be eruptive as well. So pretty interesting stuff there. So this is the list of butterflies that have no longer in the county or are extremely rare on the left. Mostly they've moved north or west. The ones in bold, mulberry wing, little yellow, and spring azure, we have found in the survey, but at very, very low numbers. The right-hand column are the butterflies that are increasing in numbers in Howard County, and the ones in red are all southern migrants, again, going with that same theme of this talk. Broad-winged skipper is an interesting one there. That really comes from the eastern shore more than anywhere else. It likes being near water. It uses Phragmites as its host plant, so it's actually morphed into a non-native plant. This butterfly was found in 2014, 15, 16, and 17 by one person in the county, Kathy Litzinger, and in all but one of her observations were in her yard. Again, going back to the theme where one garden can make a difference. And then starting in 2018, more people started to see them in different locations as well. So I asked 8 people that are pretty heavily involved in the survey what they thought the next new species for the survey would be. And I got 18 different species as a result. I asked them for 4 or 5 each. But interestingly, 6 of the 8 picked Gulf Fritillary as one of them, and 5 picked Delaware skipper. Gulf Fritillary, I think, is actually reproducing in Northern Virginia at this point. And Delaware skipper, where it used to be in the county, is we haven't seen it in a while, but it's in all of the surrounding counties. So you got to figure it's here, and we just haven't seen it. So that's a big one to look for this year. Hoary Edge is mostly in Allegheny County at this point if you go on iNaturalist, but Jim Wilkinson had one at Patuxent Wildlife Research Center this past year. So they may be around as well. Dion Skipper's at Patuxent as well, and pretty locally in Anne Arundel. Palamede swallowtail has been on the eastern shore pretty routinely and was seen in Baltimore County east of the city a couple of years ago, so that's a possibility. Striped hair streak Dick had in 2013, and some of these butterflies are just really hard to find. Brown elfin, striped hair streak, northern oak hair streak, Baltimore checker spot, all could be here, but just not easily findable. We're just not seeing them. So 2 butterfly guides to consider. The one on the left is the butterflies of Indiana. To me, it's the best butterfly field guide out there. I heard about that through MD Lepson Odes. got myself a copy. It covers 190 species, including all 80 of the butterflies seen in the survey. Seems kind of weird to be picking up a butterflies of Indiana for Maryland, but it covers everything we need. Has the best skipper ID section that I've seen. It compares field marks on similar skippers on the same page. Smaller than the butterflies through binoculars and butterflies through Pennsylvania books. Has info on host plants and nectar plants, flight time, size, habitat, little host plants, and notes. The other one that just came out more recently is the butterflies in the mid-Atlantic. It covers 120 species. It's missing 5 of the ones that have been historically found in the county. It's larger than the butterflies of Indiana and the butterflies through binoculars. It gives flight times, number of brood, size, habitat, larval host plants, and what stage it overwinters as well as notes. In my opinion, the species identification notes are pretty weak. It's worth having in a library, but for me, it's not the field guide that I would use in the field. And I'm going to turn it back over to Linda to finish it up.
Oops. Let me get my thing on here. I think am I still on the voice thing?
You are.
Okay. All right. Very good. Silvery checker spot. This is our butterfly of the year. There was an eruption here in 2013, and I watched slowly as in 2014 we could barely find him, but it was still possible along up in David Forest along the Little Patuxent. 2015, it was like we could barely find anything. 2016, 2017, we didn't see them all. Then we discovered, or not we discovered, but I think the gardeners discovered that the butterflies that they were seeing weren't pearl crescents. They had these little silvery spots, white spots on them, and they began identifying them. The gardeners found out that there was a butterfly group around somehow, and I don't know how. And we started hearing about silvery checker spots, these little butterflies showing up in gardens. And in 2020, it was like, oh, everybody's got silvery checker spot butterflies and caterpillars, and they're all over the place. We can still find them by hauling ourselves down along the river edges of the Little Patuxent River in different areas. But the majority of these are coming from the gardens around here. So this one started in 2009 being in the county in small numbers, and then increasing as we go along, clearly breeding up here. Caterpillars, breeding activity, etc. I think this is wonderful. This is a butterfly that's a more southern type. I see them a lot when I go down into southern Maryland, and it's just wonderful to have them up here. So this is our butterfly of the year. So that's it. I think that's the end of our presentation. And I want to thank all of the people. Kevin and I both want to thank all of you for doing everything that you are doing. Sending us an email that says, you know, I saw such and such over at wherever, or I saw a certain type of tree over wherever, or I didn't have time to count them as we were going, but I saw a whole group of butterflies down by the pond at wherever. So all these type of things are wonderful. All your surveys, your forms that you're sending them are wonderful. And we couldn't do this. This is truly a group activity sponsored by the club.